Some mornings feel like they're borrowed from someone else's life. Evangeline Grace Ashworth stood behind the counter of her small bookstore, golden curls escaping from yesterday's messy bun as she watched the summer rain streak down the windows of Moonrise Bay's main street. At 32, she had perfected the art of looking busy while her mind wandered to grocery lists, overdue electric bills, and the constant worry that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. The bell above the door chimed, and she glanced up from the inventory sheet she'd been pretending to read. A man stepped inside, shaking droplets from an expensive-looking linen shirt. He was tall, taller than anyone had a right to be in her tiny bookstore, with dark hair that looked like it had been cut by someone who charged more than she made in a month. "Welcome to Title Pages," she said automatically, her voice carrying the soft accent of Maine coastal towns. Can I help you find anything?" He turned toward her, and Eva's pen slipped from her fingers. Blue eyes. Steel blue, like the ocean during a storm, the same shade that looked back at her every morning when she brushed Orion's hair before school, when she helped Atlas find his favorite book before bed. "I'm just looking," he said, his voice carrying the crisp consonants of someone who had never worried about rent money. "Beautiful place you have here." Eva's throat felt dry. "Thank you, it's been in my family for generations." That was a lie. She'd bought it 3 years ago with a loan that still kept her awake at night, but strangers didn't need to know about her financial fears. The man moved through her store like he owned it, fingers trailing along book spines with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. He picked up a worn copy of Where the Crawdads Sing and examined it with the same intensity she'd seen Atlas use when studying bugs in the backyard. "You read this one?" he asked, holding up the book. "Several times," Eva replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's about finding your place in the world, I suppose. Sounds like something I could use." He set the book on the counter, pulling out a wallet that looked like it cost more than her car. "I'm Caspian, by the way. Caspian Thornfield." Eva's hand froze halfway to the register. The name hit her like a physical blow, even though she'd been expecting it for 7 years, even though she'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. "Ava," she managed. "Eva Ashworth." His eyes sharpened, recognition dawning across his features like sunrise breaking over the bay. The expensive wallet slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud that sounded like the end of the world. Eva. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a curse, everything she'd tried to forget wrapped in 2 syllables. The bell chimed again, and 2 small tornadoes burst through the door, backpacks flying, sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floors. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson said we could stay extra for art class tomorrow if—" Orion's voice died as he noticed the stranger. Atlas, always the observer, had already stopped in his tracks, blue eyes wide as they took in the tall man standing frozen by their mother's counter. Eva watched Caspian's face change as he looked at her boys, his boys, with their storm blue eyes and their father's stubborn chin. 7 years of careful explanations and gentle lies crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Boys," she said carefully, "this is Mr. Thornfield. He's just passing through town." Orion, never one to meet a stranger, stepped forward with his gap-toothed grin. "Are you here for the summer festival? Mom makes the best blueberry cookies for it. She wins every year." Caspian's voice was rough when he spoke. "And does she now? Atlas can show you his rock collection if you want," Orion continued, oblivious to the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. "He found a piece of sea glass yesterday that looks like—" "Boys." Eva's voice was sharper than she intended. "Why don't you go wash up for dinner? I'll be closing soon." As her sons reluctantly headed toward the small apartment above the store, Eva caught Caspian staring after them with an expression she couldn't quite read. Loss, wonder, something that looked dangerously like love. "They're beautiful," he said quietly. "They're mine," Eva replied, the words coming out harder than she meant. Caspian picked up his wallet, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm staying at the Ocean View Inn. Room 12. He paused at the door, one hand on the frame. "I never stopped looking for you." After he left, Eva sank onto the stool behind her counter, hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened. Upstairs, she could hear Orion chattering about the nice man, and Atlas asking quiet questions in the way that meant he was already figuring out puzzles she wasn't ready to solve. She pressed her palm against her chest, where her heart was beating so hard she was sure it would bruise. 7 years of building a life, of telling herself she was enough, of answering her boys' questions about their father with careful half-truths. And now he was here, in her bookstore, in her town, with those same blue eyes that haunted her dreams and looked back at her from her children's faces every single day. Eva closed her eyes and wondered if some storms were meant to destroy everything in their path, or if they came to wash away what was never meant to last in the first place. Sleep was a luxury Eva couldn't afford that night. She sat at her kitchen table, the same one she'd bought secondhand when the boys were 2, nursing her third cup of coffee and staring at the bills scattered across the scratched wood surface. The numbers blurred together: electricity, water, the loan payment for the bookstore. But her mind kept drifting to steel blue eyes and the way Caspian had looked at Orion and Atlas like he was seeing ghosts. The floorboards creaked above her head. Atlas, probably getting water. He'd always been the lighter sleeper, the one who seemed to absorb the world's worries through his skin. Even at 6, he carried himself like he understood things that should be beyond his years. Couldn't sleep either. Ava's heart jumped. Atlas stood in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, wearing the dinosaur pajamas she'd bought on clearance last month. His blue eyes, Caspian's eyes, were too knowing for a child. "Just paying some bills, sweetheart. Go back to bed." Atlas padded across the linoleum floor and climbed onto the chair beside her. "Was that man our daddy?" The coffee cup slipped in Eva's hands, sending liquid splashing across an overdue notice. She reached for a dish towel, buying herself time to find words that wouldn't break either of their hearts. "What makes you ask that?" "He had the same eyes as me and Ori, and he looked at you the way Prince Eric looks at Ariel in the movie, all sad and happy at the same time." Sometimes Eva forgot that Atlas saw everything, catalogued it, filed it away in that careful mind of his. She pulled him onto her lap, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. "It's complicated, baby. Is he why you cry sometimes when you think we're not looking?" Eva's chest tightened. She thought she'd been so careful, so strong. But children noticed everything, especially the things you tried to hide. "I don't want you to worry about grown-up things, Atlas. That's my job. Ori thinks he's cool. He said the man looked like a superhero in normal clothes." Atlas leaned back against her chest. "Are you scared he'll take us away?" The honesty in his voice nearly undid her. This was what she'd feared for 7 years, that Caspian would appear and shatter the fragile world she'd built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. "No one's taking you anywhere," she whispered fiercely. "You and your brother are my whole world. Nothing will ever change that." Atlas was quiet for a long moment and then, "But maybe it's okay if our world gets a little bigger." Before Eva could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Orion's arrival. Her other son appeared in the doorway, hair equally disheveled, carrying his stuffed baseball glove. "I heard talking," he said, climbing onto Eva's other side. "Are we having a midnight meeting?" "More like a midnight worry session," Eva said, kissing the top of his head. "About the man, because I think he seemed nice. He smiled at me the way Coach Peterson does when I hit a good ball." Eva's throat constricted. She remembered how Caspian used to smile at her like that, back when the world was full of possibilities instead of responsibilities. "Mom," Orion continued, "Mrs. Chen at the market said her husband didn't meet her kids until they were grown up, but then they all became best friends. She said sometimes the best things happen when you're not expecting them." Mrs. Chen, the woman who ran the corner market and dispensed wisdom along with groceries. Eva made a mental note to have a word with her about discussing grown-up business in front of children. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Eva said carefully, "and sometimes those mistakes have consequences that last a long time. But you always tell us that mistakes are just learning opportunities," Atlas pointed out of the mouths of babes. Eva looked down at her sons, these 2 miraculous beings she'd created and raised and loved with every fiber of her existence. They were right, in the way that children often were. Her fear had been protecting them, but it had also been limiting them. "Tell us about him," Orion said suddenly. "About before." "There's not much to tell. There's always something to tell," Atlas said. "You taught us that stories make everything make sense." Eva closed her eyes, remembering hot New York summers and late-night conversations on fire escapes, the way Caspian used to trace patterns on her skin and promise her the world. Before obligation and duty and the weight of family expectations crushed what they'd built, he was someone I loved very much. But sometimes love isn't enough. "It is in all the movies," Orion protested. "Real life is more complicated than movies, sweetheart." But this could be like a movie, Atlas said quietly. If we wanted it to be. Eva looked at her boys, her brave, wise, impossible boys, and felt something shift in her chest. Maybe it was time to stop running from the past and start facing it. Maybe it was time to let their world get a little bigger. The kitchen clock ticked toward midnight, and somewhere across town, she knew Caspian was probably lying awake too, staring at the ceiling and wondering if he'd lost his chance at the only thing that had ever really mattered. But morning was coming, and with it, decisions that would change everything. Again. The morning came too soon and not soon enough. Eva stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to convince herself that the dark circles under her green eyes were from the early morning light, not from a sleepless night filled with memories she'd buried deep. Her reflection stared back, 32 years old, still fighting the same battles she'd been fighting since she was 25, and pregnant with twins she'd have to raise alone. She twisted her golden hair into a practical bun, ignoring the way her hands trembled. Downstairs, she could hear the boys getting ready for school, Orion's animated chatter mixing with Atlas's quieter responses as they argued over the last of the Lucky Charms. "Mom," Orion's voice carried up the stairs. Atlas put all the marshmallows in his bowl. "They're not just marshmallows. They're magically delicious pieces of happiness," Atlas replied with the serious tone he used for everything. Despite her anxiety, Eva smiled. These moments, the ordinary chaos of single motherhood, had become her anchor. But today, even her anchor felt unstable. She made her way downstairs to find both boys already dressed for school, backpacks by the door. Atlas wore his usual muted colors, a navy blue shirt and khaki pants, while Orion had chosen a bright red superhero t-shirt that proclaimed, "Future Hero," across the chest. "You look tired, Mom," Atlas observed, studying her face with those penetrating blue eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about inventory for the store." Another lie. She was becoming too good at those. The walk to Moonrise Bay Elementary was normally Eva's favorite part of the morning. The salt air, the familiar faces of neighbors, the way the boys would race ahead and then circle back to her like excited puppies. Today, she found herself scanning every face, every parked car, wondering if Caspian was watching from somewhere. Mrs. Ashworth. Eva turned to see Rebecca Morrison, another single mom whose daughter was in the boys' class. Rebecca jogged up to them, her auburn hair bouncing in a ponytail, cheeks flushed from the morning run she took religiously. "Did you see the gorgeous guy checking into the Ocean View Inn yesterday? Lydia at the front desk said he's staying for 2 weeks. Some big shot from New York taking his first vacation in years." Rebecca's eyes sparkled with the kind of gossip that fueled small towns. "And maybe you'll finally have some decent dating options around here." Eva's stomach dropped. "I'm not looking to date anyone. Honey, you're 32, not 92. Those boys need to see their mama happy." "I am happy," Eva said, the words tasting like sawdust. "Survival isn't the same as happiness," Rebecca said gently. "Trust me, I know the difference." Before Eva could respond, they'd reached the school. The boys kissed her goodbye, Orion with his usual enthusiasm, Atlas with his careful hug that somehow conveyed more affection than a dozen casual embraces. "Pick us up at 3, Atlas asked, like he did every morning. "Wouldn't miss it," Eva replied, like she did every morning. But as she watched them disappear into the building, Atlas's hand protectively on Orion's shoulder, she wondered if by 3 o'clock, their entire world might look different. The walk back to the bookstore felt endless. Every step carried her closer to decisions she wasn't ready to make, conversations she'd avoided for 7 years. When she finally pushed open the door to title pages, the familiar scent of old books and lavender candles should have calmed her. Instead, it felt like walking into a trap. She'd barely settled behind the counter when the bell chimed. Caspian stood in the doorway, but this wasn't the polished businessman from yesterday. His dark hair was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. The vulnerability in his steel blue eyes made her chest ache. "We need to talk," he said simply. "We really don't." "Eva." He stepped closer, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, the same one that used to cling to her skin after he held her. "I've spent 7 years wondering if you were okay, if you were happy, if you ever thought about what we had. What we had was a long time ago. What we had created 2 incredible little boys who have your strength and my stubborn streak." Eva's hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare come here and act like you have any claim to them. I'm not claiming anything. I'm asking." His voice broke slightly. I'm asking if there's any chance, any possibility that we could figure this out together. You made your choice 7 years ago, Caspian. You chose your family's expectations over us. I was 28 and terrified. My father had just died. The company was falling apart, and I thought I was protecting you by walking away. By walking away to marry someone else. The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Caspian's face went pale. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Because from where I stood, watching you announce your engagement 3 months after you left, it looked pretty clear. Eva watched something crumble in his expression, saw the moment he realized just how much damage his choices had caused. But she was too raw, too afraid to let sympathy soften her resolve. Get out, she whispered. Eva, get out of my store. Get out of my town. Get out of our lives. Caspian stood frozen for a moment, then nodded slowly. As he reached the door, he turned back. I never stopped loving you, and I won't stop fighting for a chance to be the father they deserve. After he left, Eva sank onto her stool and let the tears fall. Because the worst part wasn't that he'd broken her heart 7 years ago. The worst part was that he was breaking it all over again. Some secrets are too heavy for children to carry, but too important for them to ignore. Eva spent the rest of the morning reorganizing books that didn't need reorganizing, her hands busy while her mind raced through 7 years of carefully constructed explanations that now felt as fragile as tissue paper. When 3 o'clock finally arrived, she locked up the store with shaking fingers and walked to the school, dreading the questions she knew were coming. Atlas spotted her first, as always. He had a way of finding her in any crowd, those perceptive blue eyes cutting through chaos like searchlights. Today, though, something was different in his expression, a gravity that made her stomach clench. Mom, he said as soon as he reached her, Orion bouncing alongside him with his usual energy. Timmy Henderson's dad came to eat lunch with him today. Eva's heart sank. She knew where this was heading. Oh, that's nice, a sweetheart. He brought Subway sandwiches and taught the whole table how to make paper airplanes, Orion added, his superhero backpack sliding off one shoulder. It was so cool. His dad knew all these tricks and he stopped abruptly, his enthusiasm deflating as he realized what he was saying. The walk home was quieter than usual. Eva could feel the weight of unasked questions hanging between them like storm clouds. When they reached the small apartment above the bookstore, both boys went straight to the kitchen table where she'd left coloring books and snacks, their usual after-school routine. But instead of reaching for the crayons, Atlas folded his hands on the table like he was conducting a business meeting. We need to talk, he said, using the same words she'd heard Caspian say that morning. Eva pulled out a chair, her heart hammering. And about what? About our dad, Orion said quietly, all his usual chatter gone. The real story this time. Boys, please, Mom. Atlas's voice was gentle but firm. We're not babies anymore. Orion's reading chapter books. And I already know how babies are made because Sophia Chen told me at recess. Sophia Chen needs to mind her own business, Eva muttered. That man yesterday, he looked at us like we belonged to him, Orion said. And you looked at him like he belonged to you, even though you were scared. Eva stared at her sons, these two extraordinary beings who had somehow inherited all of her stubbornness and none of her fear. They sat there waiting, patient in the way that children could be when they sensed something important was happening. What do you want to know? She asked finally. Everything, Atlas said simply. Eva took a deep breath. His name is Caspian Thornfield. We met when I was 25 and working in New York City. He was the most interesting person I'd ever met. Smart and funny and kind, even though he pretended to be all serious and businesslike. Did you love him? Orion asked. Very much. Did he love you back? Eva's throat tightened. I thought he did. What happened? Atlas leaned forward, his small face serious. His family didn't think I was good enough for him. I wasn't rich or important. I was just a girl from Maine who worked in a coffee shop and dreamed of owning a bookstore. Eva twisted her wedding ring, the simple band she'd bought herself when the boys were born, as a reminder that she was enough. When I found out I was pregnant with you two, I tried to tell him, but he was already getting married to someone else. Atlas finished quietly. Eva's eyes widened. How did you? I looked him up on Mom's computer last night, Atlas admitted. After you went to bed, I wanted to see if he looked like us. Atlas Ashworth. Eva's voice was sharp with panic. You know you're not supposed to. I'm sorry, he said quickly, but I found pictures. From his wedding and stuff. She's very pretty. Eva felt like the air had been sucked from her lungs. Her 6-year-old son had seen pictures of Caspian's wedding, had probably read articles about his perfect life with his perfect wife. Are they still married? Orion asked in a small voice. Yes. The word came out like broken glass. Both boys were quiet for a long moment. Then Orion, always the optimist, brightened slightly. But he came here. To see us, right? Maybe he's not happy being married to her. Orion, that's not how marriage works. Mrs. Patterson got divorced last year and now she's much happier, Atlas pointed out with his usual logic. She smiles all the time now and bought a red car. Ava rubbed her temples. Boys, this is complicated. Adult relationships aren't like the movies or the books I read to you. People make choices and sometimes those choices hurt other people, even when they don't mean to. But he hurt you, Atlas said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And that's why you cry sometimes when you think we're asleep. Eva's chest constricted. I don't want you two worrying about grown-up problems. We're already worrying, Orion said matter-of-factly. Atlas has been having bad dreams where faceless men come to take us away, and I've been wondering if the reason I'm not good at baseball is because I don't have a dad to teach me. Oh, sweetheart. Eva pulled both boys into a fierce hug. You are both perfect exactly as you are, and no one is ever taking you away from me. But what if he wants to be our dad now? Atlas asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. What if he's sorry he missed everything? Eva held her sons tighter, breathing in their familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. How could she explain that some sorries came too late, that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt? I don't know, she whispered. I honestly don't know. But as she held them close, she realized that maybe not knowing was the first step toward finding out. The next morning brought unexpected courage in the form of a 6-year-old with grass stains on his knees. Ava was stacking books in the front window display when Orion burst through the bookstore door, his superhero cape, actually an old beach towel, streaming behind him. Atlas followed more cautiously, carrying his ever-present notebook where he recorded important observations about life. Mom, Orion announced breathlessly. We saw him. Ava's hand stilled on the copy of Pride and Prejudice she'd been arranging. Saw who? Our dad, Atlas said quietly. He was at Murphy's diner, sitting by himself. He looked. Atlas paused, searching for the right word. Lonely. Ava's chest tightened. Murphy's diner was where she'd taken the boys for pancakes every Saturday morning, since they were old enough to sit in high chairs. It was their place, their tradition. The fact that Caspian had somehow found it felt like another invasion of the carefully constructed world she'd built. He waved at us. Orion continued, climbing onto the reading chair they'd rescued from a garage sale 3 years ago. And an Atlas waved back before he could stop himself. I was being polite, Atlas defended, his cheeks flushing pink. Grandma Beth always said it's rude to ignore people. Eva smiled despite herself. Her mother's lessons in Southern hospitality lived on, even here in coastal Maine. Did he say anything? Both boys shook their heads, but there was something in Atlas's expression that suggested he wanted to say more. What is it, sweetheart? Atlas opened his notebook to a fresh page, his pencil moving in careful strokes as he wrote. When he finished, he tore out the paper and handed it to her. Maybe some sad people just need someone to wave back. Eva stared at her son's careful handwriting. Each letter formed with the precision he brought to everything. Such wisdom from someone who still needed help tying his shoes. Atlas. The bell above the door chimed, and they all turned to see Dorothy Hutchinson, the town librarian, bustling in with her usual armload of books to trade. Dorothy was 73, had never married, and possessed the supernatural ability to know everyone's business before they knew it themselves. Ava, dear, Dorothy said, setting her books on the counter with more force than necessary. I hear we have a celebrity in town. I wouldn't call him a celebrity, Mrs. Hutchins. Oh, I would. Caspian Thornfield made the Forbes Under 40 list 3 years running, built his father's failing company into a billion-dollar empire. Dorothy's steel-gray eyes fixed on Eva with laser precision. Interesting that he'd choose Moonrise Bay for his vacation, don't you think? Eva could feel her son's attention shifting between her and Dorothy like spectators at a tennis match. Mrs. Hutchins saw him this morning at Murphy's. Dorothy continued relentlessly. Poor man looked like he hadn't slept in days. Martha said he ordered coffee and just sat there staring at the door like he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was waiting for his wife, Eva said. the words tasting bitter. "Oh, honey." Dorothy's expression softened. "You haven't heard." Ava's blood went cold. "Heard what?" "About the divorce. It was all over the financial papers last month. Apparently it was quite amicable. More of a business dissolution than a marriage ending. They were never really—" Dorothy glanced meaningfully at the boys. "Well, let's just say it was one of those arrangements that benefits everyone involved." The world tilted sideways. Eva gripped the edge of the counter, Dorothy's words echoing in her head like a bell she couldn't unring. Divorced. Caspian was divorced. "Are you all right, dear? You look pale." "I'm fine," Eva managed, though she felt anything but fine. "Mom?" Orion's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's divorce?" "It's when married people decide they're better as friends," Atlas answered before Eva could respond. "Like when you and Tommy Morrison decided you couldn't be lab partners anymore because you work better separately." Dorothy chuckled. "Smart boy. Takes after his mother." After Dorothy left with her new stack of romance novels, because even 73-year-old librarians needed escapist fiction, Eva sat behind her counter in stunned silence. The boys had returned to their coloring books, but she could feel Atlas watching her with those too perceptive eyes. "Mom," he said finally, "does this change things?" Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. Eva looked at her sons, Orion with his wild imagination and boundless optimism, Atlas with his careful observations and quiet wisdom. They deserved the truth, even if she wasn't sure what the truth was anymore. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe. Maybe is better than no," Orion said, not looking up from his coloring book where he was creating what appeared to be a family of superheroes. "Maybe means possibility," Atlas added, writing something new in his notebook. Eva wondered when her 6-year-olds had become wiser than she was, but as she watched them color and write, she felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Maybe, she thought. Maybe was terrifying and hopeful and absolutely impossible to ignore. Maybe it was time to find out what came next. Sometimes the universe forces conversations you're not ready to have. Eva pushed her grocery cart through the narrow aisles of Morrison's Market, checking items off her carefully budgeted list while trying to ignore the whispered conversations that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. Word traveled fast in Moonrise Bay, and apparently Dorothy Hutchins had been busy spreading the news about their mysterious visitor. "Mama, can we get the cookies with the rainbow sprinkles?" Orion asked, standing on his tiptoes to reach a package on the shelf. "Those are for special occasions," Eva replied automatically, steering the cart toward the produce section. "Maybe this is a special occasion," Atlas observed from his perch on the cart's edge, his legs dangling as they moved. "Maybe every day could be a special occasion if we decided it was." Eva paused, studying her son's thoughtful expression. When had he become so philosophical? "Besides," Orion added with his gap-toothed grin, "you always say we should celebrate the small victories. I got an A on my spelling test yesterday, and Atlas finished that really hard puzzle. That's 2 victories right there." Before Eva could respond, she heard a familiar voice from the next aisle over. "No, I understand the quarterly projections look concerning, but—" Caspian's voice was tight with frustration. "Marcus, I told you I'm taking time off. Handle it." Eva froze, her hand suspended over a bag of apples. The boys had gone completely still, both of them listening with the acute attention children reserved for adult conversations they weren't supposed to hear. "I don't care what the board thinks," Caspian continued, his voice growing louder. "Some things are more important than profit margins." Atlas slipped down from the cart and, before Eva could stop him, peered around the corner. She held her breath, waiting for the inevitable. "He's buying ice cream," Atlas whispered when he returned. 3 different flavors, and he looks really sad while he's doing it. "Maybe he doesn't know which one to pick," Orion suggested. "Or maybe," Atlas said with the gravity of someone much older, "he's buying them for people he hopes will want to share them with him." Eva's chest constricted. She tried to steer the cart in the opposite direction, but Moonrise Bay's market wasn't designed for avoiding people. The aisles were too narrow, the store too small, and her luck too terrible. She rounded the corner to find Caspian standing in front of the frozen food section, holding 3 pints of ice cream and looking completely lost. He'd traded his expensive suits for jeans and a navy blue sweater that made his eyes look even more intense. His dark hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his fingers through it. "Chocolate chip, strawberry, or vanilla," he said without looking up, as if continuing a conversation they'd been having. And I couldn't remember which one was your favorite. I don't have a favorite, Eva replied quietly. Everyone has a favorite. Mom likes cookie dough, Orion announced before Eva could shush him. And Atlas likes anything with chocolate. I like whatever has the most colors. Caspian's eyes moved to the boys, and Eva watched his entire expression soften. Cookie dough. I should have remembered that. You couldn't have, Eva said. We didn't get to the ice cream stage. The words hung between them, heavy with everything they'd never had the chance to discover about each other. 7 years of missed conversations, missed moments, missed everything. I've been staying at the inn, Caspian said carefully. Room 12 has a kitchen, if you ever wanted to, if the boys wanted to. We love ice cream, Orion said with his usual enthusiasm. And Mom never lets us have it before dinner. But maybe you have different rules. Orion, Eva warned. What? I'm just being friendly. You said we should always be polite to visitors. Atlas stepped closer to Caspian, studying him with those penetrating blue eyes. Are you really our dad? The question hit like a physical blow. Eva saw Caspian's throat work as he swallowed hard. Yes, he said simply. I am. Why didn't you come before? Eva started to intervene, but Caspian held up a gentle hand. Because I made a mistake, he told Atlas. A really big one. And I thought I was protecting your mom by staying away, but I was really just being a coward. Cowards are people who don't fight for what's important, Orion said, quoting something Eva had told him when he was afraid to try out for the school play. Exactly. So what are you fighting for now? Atlas asked. Caspian's eyes found Eva's across the narrow aisle. The chance to be the father you deserve, and maybe the chance to prove to your mother that I'm not the same man who walked away 7 years ago. Eva felt tears prick at her eyes. The raw honesty in his voice, the way he was looking at her like she held his entire future in her hands. It was everything she'd dreamed of hearing and everything she was terrified to believe. We should go, she managed. Eva, please. Boys, say goodbye to Mr. Thornfield. Goodbye, Dad, Orion said cheerfully, as if he'd been calling Caspian that his entire life. Atlas was more cautious. Goodbye, Caspian. Maybe we'll see you again soon. As they walked away, Eva heard Caspian's voice, soft and broken. I hope so. At the checkout line, Atlas tugged on her sweater. Mom, what, sweetheart? He bought all 3 flavors. That means he's hoping all 3 of us will want to have ice cream with him. Eva looked back toward the frozen food section, where Caspian was still standing with his armload of possibilities. Maybe, she thought again, that dangerous, hopeful, terrifying. Maybe that was slowly breaking down every wall she'd built around her heart. The knock came at 6:30, just as Eva was burning dinner for the 2nd time that week. She stood frozen in her small kitchen, smoke alarm chirping overhead while the boys sat at the table pretending to do homework, but actually whispering about whether she should answer the door. They all knew who it was. There was only one person in Moonrise Bay who knocked with such careful hesitation, like he was afraid his presence might shatter something precious. Mom, Atlas said quietly, closing his math workbook. The chicken nuggets are on fire. Eva rushed to turn off the stove, waving away smoke with a dish towel while cursing under her breath. This was exactly how she'd pictured her life, 32 years old, burning frozen food while her ex-lover stood outside her door with 3 pints of ice cream and 7 years of regret. The knocking came again, softer this time. Should I get it? Orion asked, already halfway out of his chair. No. Eva smoothed her hair, which had escaped its ponytail during her battle with dinner. I'll get it. She opened the door to find Caspian standing on her narrow landing, looking impossibly tall in the small space. He'd changed clothes again, dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that made him look younger, more like the man she'd fallen in love with in New York. In his hands, he held a grocery bag and an expression that was equal parts hopeful and terrified. I brought ice cream, he said unnecessarily, and pizza. I thought maybe. If you hadn't eaten yet. The smoke alarm chose that moment to let out another shrill beep, and Eva wanted to disappear into the floor. We were just having dinner, she said weakly. Caspian glanced past her toward the kitchen, where a thin haze of smoke still lingered and the boys were peering around the corner with undisguised curiosity. Ah, the famous chicken nuggets. Despite everything, Eva almost smiled. How did you? Lucky guess. Plus, Atlas mentioned at the market that you burn dinner when you're nervous. I do not burn dinner when I'm nervous. Just when handsome strangers show up at your bookstore. The teasing note in his voice was so familiar it made her chest ache. This was the Caspian she remembered, the one who could make her laugh even when she was furious with him. "Pizza sounds good," Orion called from the kitchen. "Mom's cooking has been really weird lately." "Orion James Ashworth," Ava warned. "What? It's true. Yesterday you put salt in your coffee instead of sugar." Atlas appeared at Eva's side, studying Caspian with those analytical blue eyes. "Did you bring the cookie dough ice cream?" "I did." Caspian held up the bag. "And chocolate chip for you and rainbow sherbet for your brother. How did you know about the rainbow sherbet?" "Your mom told me once that she wanted kids who would love color the way she loved words." Caspian's eyes found Ava's. "I remembered more than you think." Something shifted in Ava's chest. A loosening of the tight control she'd maintained for 7 years. Because he was right. She had said that during one of their late-night conversations on his fire escape when the city felt like it belonged to just the two of them. "One dinner," she heard herself saying. "That's all." The smile that broke across Caspian's face could have powered the entire town. 20 minutes later, Eva found herself sitting at her second-hand table, watching Caspian attempt to cut pizza with a butter knife because she didn't own a pizza cutter. He'd insisted on using plates instead of eating from the box, and somehow he made even that simple gesture seem elegant. "So," he said, serving Atlas the first slice, "tell me about school." "I like reading and science," Atlas replied seriously. "And Orion likes everything that's loud and involves running." "I do not," Orion protested through a mouthful of pizza. "I also like drawing and music and that thing where you make volcanoes explode." "That's science, buddy," Caspian said, and Ava's heart clenched at how naturally the endearment came to him. "Do you like science?" Atlas asked. "I love science. I studied engineering before I took over my father's company." "What kind of engineering?" "Structural. I wanted to build bridges." Ava nearly choked on her water. Bridges. Of course he'd wanted to build bridges. "Did you ever build any?" Orion asked. "A few small ones before." Caspian glanced at Eva. "Before other responsibilities took over. Maybe you could build one here," Atlas suggested. "Moonrise Bay could use a better bridge to the mainland. The current one makes scary noises when trucks go over it." "Maybe I could," Caspian said thoughtfully, "if I decided to stay." The words hung in the air like a question nobody was brave enough to answer directly. After dinner, as Caspian helped clear the table with the careful attention of someone who wanted to do everything right, Orion tugged on his sleeve. "Want to see our room?" Eva started to protest, but Atlas was already leading the way upstairs, chattering about their bunk beds and the glow-in-the-dark stars Eva had helped them stick to the ceiling. Left alone in the kitchen, Eva found herself standing next to the man who had once promised her the world and then taken it away. But this version of Caspian, sleeves rolled up, helping with dishes in her tiny kitchen, felt different, real in a way that the polished businessman had never been. "They're incredible," he said quietly, drying a plate with the dish towel that had seen better days. "You did an amazing job raising them. I had help. The whole town, really. It takes a village and all that. But mostly it was you." He set the plate down carefully. "Ava, I know I don't have the right to ask, but—" "You're right," she interrupted. "You don't have the right, but ask anyway." He turned to face her fully, those steel blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Is there any chance, any possibility at all, that we could try again? Not pick up where we left off, but start over. Build something new." Eva looked toward the stairs, where she could hear her son's laughter mixing with Caspian's deeper voice as he admired their rock collection. For the first time in 7 years, her small apartment felt full instead of just crowded. "I don't know," she whispered, "but maybe we could find out." Outside, the evening tide was coming in, and Eva wondered if some things were meant to return to shore. Some moments change everything, and they never come with warnings. Eva was restocking the poetry section when the sleek black sedan pulled up outside title pages. Through the window, she watched a woman emerge from the passenger seat, tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair styled in a perfect chignon, and wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Eva made in 3 months. Her blood turned to ice. Ophelia Blackthorne. Even after the divorce, she still carried herself like royalty, still moved through the world as if it existed solely for her convenience. Eva had seen enough society page photos over the years to recognize Caspian's ex-wife. but seeing her in person was like watching a magazine come to life, and she was walking straight toward the bookstore. "Boys," Eva called sharply to Orion and Atlas, who were building a fort out of returned books in the children's section. "Go upstairs. Now." "But Mom," Orion started. "Now." Something in her tone must have warned them. Both boys scrambled to their feet and disappeared up the back stairs just as the bell above the door chimed with an ominous finality. Ophelia glided into the store like she owned it, her designer heels clicking against the worn hardwood floors. Up close, she was even more intimidating, flawlessly beautiful in the way that only came from excellent genetics and unlimited resources. Her pale blue eyes swept the store with the calculating assessment of someone who was used to cataloging other people's weaknesses. "So, this is where he's been hiding," Ophelia said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of old money and private schools. "Quaint. Can I help you?" Eva managed, proud that her voice came out steady. "You must be Evangeline." Ophelia's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm Ophelia, Caspian's wife. Well, ex-wife, technically. But these things are so complicated, don't you think?" Eva's hands clenched at her sides. "What do you want?" "To meet the woman who's been haunting my marriage for 7 years. Ophelia moved closer, and Eva caught the scent of expensive perfume, something French and intimidating. "You're not quite what I expected. I'm sorry to disappoint you." "Oh, you don't disappoint me, darling. You fascinate me." Ophelia picked up a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre from the nearby display, examining it like it was a foreign artifact. "You see, I always wondered what it was about you that made my husband so distracted. Even on our wedding day, he looked like he was somewhere else entirely." Ava's chest tightened. "That's between you and him." "Actually, no, it's between all of us now, isn't it? Because those adorable little boys upstairs, yes, I saw them scurrying away like mice. They're the reason my marriage was never really a marriage at all. Your marriage failed because it was built on convenience and not love." Ophelia laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "Love, how wonderfully naive. Do you really think love is enough? Love doesn't pay for private schools or trust funds or the kind of security those children will need. They have everything they need." "Do they?" Ophelia's eyes swept the small bookstore with obvious disdain. "Second-hand furniture, a mother who works retail, a tiny apartment above a failing business. You call that everything?" Each word hit like a physical blow, because they echoed every insecurity Eva had carried for 7 years. Every night she'd lain awake wondering if she was enough, if she could give her boys the opportunities they deserved. "You don't know anything about us." "I know more than you think." Ophelia set down the book with deliberate care. "I know that Caspian's been sending money to a private account for years. Did you think those anonymous donations to the Children's Hospital Fund in your sons' names were coincidences? The scholarship money that appeared when you needed it most." Eva's world tilted sideways. "That's not—" "He wouldn't." "Oh, but he would. And he did. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time he felt guilty about abandoning his responsibilities." Ophelia's smile was poisonous. "You've been living on his charity without even knowing it. You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask him yourself. Ask him about the college funds he's been building. Ask him about the medical insurance he's been paying. Ask him why he really came to this little fishing village." Eva felt sick. Had everything been a lie? Had her independence, her pride, her carefully constructed life all been built on Caspian's guilt money? "Here's what's going to happen," Ophelia continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone used to giving orders. "You're going to take the boys and leave. Tonight. There's a very generous check in my purse that will set you up somewhere far from here. Somewhere Caspian won't think to look. I'm not going anywhere." "No? Then consider this. Caspian is worth $3 billion. If he decides he wants custody of those boys, what do you think your chances are? A single mother working in a bookstore versus a man who can afford the best lawyers in the country." The words hit Eva like a physical blow, because they were her worst nightmare spoken aloud. She'd always known that if Caspian wanted to take the boys, he probably could. Money bought justice, and she had never had enough of either. He wouldn't do that. Wouldn't he? Men like Caspian collect things, darling. Companies, buildings, families. And when they decide they want something, they take it. Eva's hands were shaking now. "Get out. Think about it," Ophelia said, moving toward the door with predatory grace. "What's best for those boys? A life of struggle with a mother who can barely keep the lights on, or a future with every door opened for them?" Get out of my store. Ophelia paused at the door, her hand on the frame. You know I'm right. Deep down, you know that loving them means letting them go. After she left, Ava sank onto the stool behind her counter, Ophelia's words echoing in her head like a curse. Upstairs, she could hear the boys' muffled voices, probably listening at the top of the stairs the way children did when they sensed something was wrong. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caspian. Had a great time last night. Can we do it again soon? Ava stared at the message until the words blurred together. Had it all been an act? The gentle father? The man who seemed to genuinely care about her feelings? Was she just another acquisition to him? Another broken thing he thought he could fix with enough money? She looked around her small bookstore, her dream made real through years of sacrifice and determination. Was it really so pathetic? Was her love really not enough? Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Moonrise Bay, and Eva wondered if she was about to lose everything she'd ever cared about. Sometimes the truth is a grenade with a 7-year fuse. Eva stood in her bedroom at midnight, throwing clothes into the same duffel bag she'd used to leave New York 7 years ago. Her hands moved mechanically. Jeans, sweaters, the boys' school clothes, while her mind replayed every interaction she'd had with Caspian since he'd arrived. Had she missed the signs? Had she been so desperate to believe in happy endings that she'd ignored the obvious? The anonymous donations, the mysteriously affordable rent on the bookstore, the scholarship money that had appeared just when she needed it most. Her independent life had been a carefully constructed illusion, funded by the man who'd abandoned her. Mom? Atlas stood in the doorway, his dinosaur pajamas wrinkled from sleep, those blue eyes, Caspian's eyes, wide with concern. Behind him, Orion clutched his stuffed baseball glove, looking smaller than his 6 years. What are you doing? Atlas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. We're taking a trip, Eva said, her voice artificially bright. Won't that be fun? We can visit Aunt Sarah in Portland, maybe go to the Children's Museum. At midnight, Atlas stepped closer, his analytical mind already putting pieces together. Mom, are you running away? The question hit like a physical blow, out of the mouths of babes. I'm not running away, I'm protecting you. From what? Orion climbed onto the bed, sitting cross-legged among the scattered clothes. From our dad. Eva's hands stilled on a sweater. It's complicated, baby. You keep saying that, Atlas said quietly. But maybe it's only complicated because you're making it complicated. Before Eva could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all freeze. Heavy, familiar footsteps that could only belong to one person. Ava, Caspian's voice carried up from the bookstore below. Your door was unlocked. I saw the lights on and I was worried. His voice trailed off as he presumably took in the scene. Books scattered on the floor, papers strewn across the counter, the obvious signs of someone preparing to flee. Stay here, Eva whispered to the boys. But they were already padding down the stairs in their bare feet, drawn by curiosity and the magnetic pull of a father they barely knew, but instinctively trusted. Eva found them in the bookstore, Atlas explaining in his serious voice that Mom's having one of her scared moments, while Orion showed Caspian the makeshift fort they'd built earlier, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling through the air. Caspian looked up as Ava appeared, and she saw the moment he took in her appearance, the tear-streaked face, the defensive posture, the guilt written across her features like accusations. She came here, Ava said without preamble. Ophelia, she told me about the money. Caspian went very still. Eva, 7 years, Caspian. 7 years of anonymous donations and mysterious scholarships and rent payments that never quite made sense. Her voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. Be 7 years of me thinking I was strong and independent when really I was just another one of your charity cases. It wasn't charity. Then what was it? It was love. The words came out raw, desperate. It was me trying to take care of you the only way I could from a distance. It was me lying awake every night wondering if you had enough money for groceries, if the boys needed coats, if you were okay. You didn't have the right. I know that. Caspian's voice cracked. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I hated myself every time I sent that money, knowing it would never be enough, knowing it could never make up for not being there? Atlas stepped between them, his small hands reaching for both of their hands. Stop yelling. You're scaring Orion. Eva looked over to see her other son pressed against the bookshelf, his superhero pajamas a stark contrast to the adult drama playing out around him. The sight of his frightened face cut through her anger like a knife. "I'm sorry," she whispered, kneeling to gather both boys close. "I'm so sorry." "Why are you trying to leave?" Orion asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "Because," Eva looked up at Caspian, seeing her own pain reflected in his face. "Because sometimes loving someone means protecting them from people who might hurt them." "But he's not hurting us," Atlas said with devastating simplicity. "He brought us ice cream and helped with homework and listened to all my questions about rocks. He's not scary like the lady with the fancy car." Eva's blood went cold. "You saw her?" "From the window upstairs," Orion admitted. "She looked mean, like the villains in movies, but wearing nicer clothes." Caspian's jaw tightened. "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you collect things. That you'll take the boys away from me when you get bored of playing house." Eva's voice broke. "That I'm not enough to give them what they need." "She's lying." "Is she?" "Because $3 billion buys a lot of very good lawyers, and I can barely afford to keep the lights on." "I don't want lawyers, Ava. I want us. I want you and me and those two incredible boys figuring out how to be a family." Caspian stepped closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "I want Saturday morning pancakes and burned chicken nuggets and homework battles and all of it. The messy, complicated, beautiful reality of it. Pretty words don't change the facts." "Then let me change the facts." Caspian pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts with shaking fingers. "Marcus?" "Yes. I know it's late. I need you to draft some papers." "No, not business papers. I want to sign over my personal assets to a trust for Evangeline Ashworth and her sons." "No, not if something happens to me. I want to sign them over now." Eva stared at him. "What are you doing?" "Leveling the playing field." He ended the call and looked at her with those steel blue eyes that had haunted her dreams for 7 years. "You want to know the difference between me and Ophelia? She thinks love is about possession. I know love is about choice." "Caspian, I'm giving you the money, Eva, all of it. The company, the assets, everything. So that if you choose to be with me, it's because you want to be, not because you have to be. And if you choose to leave," his voice caught, "then you'll have everything you need to build whatever life you want." The boys were watching this exchange with wide eyes, too young to understand the magnitude of what was happening, but old enough to sense its importance. "You can't just give away $3 billion, Eva whispered. "Watch me." Caspian's smile was heartbreaking. "I spent 7 years building an empire I never wanted, trying to fill the hole you left. Money can't buy what matters, Eva. I learned that the hard way." Eva looked at this man, this impossible, frustrating, generous man who was willing to give up everything just to prove he loved her. Then she looked at her sons, who were watching their parents with hope and terror warring in their identical blue eyes. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered. "What if we try and it doesn't work? Then at least we'll know we tried." Caspian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes, Eva, but I can promise I'll never walk away again." Outside, the storm that had been brewing all day finally broke, rain lashing against the windows of the little bookstore where a family was slowly, carefully, learning how to heal. Some storms don't come to destroy. They come to wash everything clean. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving Moonrise Bay glistening like a jewel under the early sun. Eva stood at her kitchen window, watching the tide pools reflect the sky while coffee brewed behind her. She hadn't slept. None of them had. But for the first time in 7 years, her insomnia felt like possibility instead of anxiety. Caspian sat at her small table, laptop open, speaking quietly into his phone as he made good on his impossible promise. Marcus, his lawyer, had been working through the night, drafting papers that would transfer billions of dollars to a woman who'd been surviving paycheck to paycheck. The boys flanked him like tiny advisors, Atlas reading over legal documents he couldn't possibly understand while Orion drew pictures of superheroes on the margins. "Are you sure about this?" Eva asked, as Caspian ended another call. He looked up at her, those steel blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, but your company will thrive without me. I built good systems, hired brilliant people. They don't need me micromanaging every decision from 3,000 miles away." He gestured to the boys. "These two need me more than any board of directors ever will." Atlas looked up from the legal document. Does this mean we're rich now?" "It means you're secure," Caspian said carefully. "There's a difference. What's the difference? Orion asked, abandoning his drawing. Rich is having money. Secure is having enough money that you never have to worry about losing the things that matter most. Eva's throat tightened. How was it possible that this man understood her deepest fears so completely? A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Eva's stomach clenched, remembering yesterday's unwelcome visitor. But when she opened it, she found Dorothy Hutchins standing on the landing with a covered casserole dish and her signature knowing smile. "Thought you might need some proper breakfast after the night you've had," Dorothy said, bustling past Eva into the kitchen. "The whole town's been watching that fancy car circle the block since dawn. I suspect your uninvited guest isn't quite ready to give up." As if summoned by her words, the sleek black sedan pulled up outside again. This time, however, Ophelia wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit emerged from the driver's side, someone Eva didn't recognize but who carried himself with the predatory confidence of a high-powered attorney. "Vultures," Dorothy muttered, setting down her casserole with more force than necessary. "Some people don't know when to accept defeat gracefully." Caspian's expression darkened as he watched through the window. "She's not going to stop. Ophelia doesn't lose, and she certainly doesn't lose to someone she considers beneath her." "Then maybe it's time we reminded her that she already lost," Eva said quietly. Before anyone could ask what she meant, Eva was heading for the door. She made it halfway down the stairs before Caspian caught up with her. "Eva, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She turned to face him on the narrow stairway. "For 7 years, I've been running from my own life, from you, from the possibility of being hurt again, from the chance that I might not be enough. But I am enough, Caspian. We are enough, and it's time I started acting like it." They emerged from the bookstore together, presenting a united front that made Ophelia's carefully composed expression flicker with uncertainty. The lawyer beside her stepped forward with practiced aggression. "Ms. Ashworth, I'm Jonathan Pierce, representing Mrs. Thornfield's interests. We're here to discuss custody arrangements that would be in the best interests of the minor children." "There are no custody arrangements to discuss," Eva said calmly. "The children have 2 parents who love them and are perfectly capable of making decisions about their welfare. Mrs. Thornfield has concerns about the children's living situation." "Mrs. Thornfield," Caspian interrupted, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of running boardrooms, "has no legal standing in this matter. She was never the children's stepmother, never adopted them, and has no biological or legal claim to them whatsoever." Ophelia's composure cracked slightly. "Caspian, be reasonable. You can't seriously intend to raise children in this environment." "What's wrong with our environment?" Orion's voice piped up from the bookstore doorway, where both boys had appeared despite being told to stay upstairs. Eva started to usher them back inside, but Atlas stepped forward with that serious expression he wore when he was about to say something important. "Our environment has books and hugs and burned dinners that taste good anyway because Mom made them," he said with devastating simplicity. "It has a dad who remembers our favorite ice cream, and a mom who reads us stories every night. What else do we need?" The lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but Orion wasn't finished. "And if you're worried about money," he added with 6-year-old logic, "our dad just gave us all of his, so we're probably richer than you are now." A smile tugged at the corner of Eva's mouth. Leave it to her children to reduce complex legal maneuvering to its essential absurdity. Ophelia's face had gone pale. "You didn't, Caspian. Tell me you didn't actually sign over my entire fortune to the woman I love and our children." "Yes, I did." Caspian moved closer to Eva, his hand finding hers. "Turns out when you love someone, their happiness matters more than your net worth. You're being ridiculous. This infatuation will pass. And then what? You'll be left with nothing. I'll be left with everything that matters." Eva felt something inside her chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming, because this was what love looked like when it grew up, not the desperate passion of youth, but the steady commitment of 2 people choosing each other every day. "Mr. Pierce," she said to the lawyer, "you can tell your client that if she ever comes near my family again, she'll be dealing with legal representation that makes her look like a public defender. We have resources now." As the black sedan finally pulled away, Eva turned to find Caspian watching her with an expression of pure amazement. "What?" she asked. "I'm just trying to figure out when you became even more incredible than I remembered. Probably around the time I stopped being afraid of my own shadow." Atlas tugged on both their hands. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Eva looked at her sons. brave, wise, impossible boys who had somehow navigated the wreckage of adult mistakes with more grace than any of the adults involved. Then she looked at Caspian, who had given up everything for the chance to be part of their ordinary, extraordinary life. "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with tears she was finally ready to shed. "I think it does." And as the morning sun painted Moonrise Bay in shades of gold and possibility, a family that had been broken for 7 years finally learned how to be whole. Some love stories don't end with a wedding. They begin with one. The beach at Moonrise Bay stretched endlessly under an October sky painted in shades of amber and rose. Eva stood at the water's edge, her bare feet sinking into the cool sand, watching as Caspian helped 9-year-old Atlas arrange smooth stones in a careful pattern, while Orion chased seagulls with the boundless energy that had never dimmed. 3 years. 3 years since that stormy night when their broken family had finally learned how to heal. 3 years of Saturday morning pancakes and homework battles, of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of learning that love wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up day after day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "Mom, look," Orion called, running toward her with something clutched in his fist. "I found sea glass, the blue kind Atlas likes." Eva smiled, reaching for the smooth piece of ocean glass that matched her son's eyes, Caspian's eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. He'll love it." "Are you sure you want to do this here?" Caspian asked, appearing at her side with Atlas in tow. "We could still have the ceremony at the inn, or in the garden behind the bookstore." "This is perfect," Eva replied, adjusting the simple white dress that moved like sea foam around her legs. "This is where we used to bring the boys when they were little, where I told them stories about their father coming home someday. It feels right to make it official here." Atlas stepped forward, serious in his role as ring-bearer, the same intensity he brought to everything now focused on the small velvet box in his hands. "Are you nervous, Mom?" "A little," Eva admitted. "Good nervous or bad nervous?" She looked at Caspian, her partner in the beautiful chaos of daily life, the man who had chosen to build bridges instead of walls. "Good nervous. The best kind." The ceremony was small, intimate, just the 4 of them and Pastor Williams from the local church, Dorothy Hutchins serving as witness with tears in her eyes, and Rebecca Morrison taking pictures with her phone. No fancy flowers, no elaborate decorations, just the ocean as their backdrop and their children as their greatest blessing. When Pastor Williams asked if they had written their own vows, Eva and Caspian looked at each other and smiled. "And we wrote them together," Eva said, pulling out a piece of paper worn soft from being folded and unfolded countless times. "Because that's what we do now. Everything together. I promise," Caspian began, his voice carrying across the sand, "to never again let fear make my decisions, to choose us every day, in big ways and small ones. I promise," Eva continued, "to trust that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave enough to believe in impossible things. We promise," they said together, "to build a life that's messy and real and full of the kind of love that grows stronger with time." Atlas stepped forward with the rings, simple bands they'd chosen together at the local jewelry store. Nothing fancy, but everything they needed. As Caspian slipped the ring onto Eva's finger, she thought about the scared 25-year-old who had left New York with nothing but a broken heart and a fierce determination to survive. She had survived. More than that, she had thrived. "You may kiss the bride," Pastor Williams announced with a smile, and as Caspian's lips met hers, with their sons cheering and the ocean singing its eternal song, Eva tasted salt air and possibility, and the kind of happiness that came from finally being exactly where you belonged. Later, as the sun began to set and they walked back toward the bookstore, their bookstore now, expanded with a children's section that was Caspian's pride and joy, Orion skipped ahead while Atlas walked between his parents, occasionally reaching for both their hands. "Mom," Atlas said as they reached the familiar blue door of title pages. "Do you think we'll always be this happy?" Eva looked at her family, her husband now, her brave sons, her little bookstore with its warm yellow windows glowing against the gathering dusk. Life would bring challenges, she knew. There would be difficult days and hard conversations and moments when love would require more courage than they thought they possessed. But they would face it together. "I think," she said, squeezing Atlas's hand while Caspian unlocked the door to their home, "we'll be exactly as happy as we choose to be. Then we'll always be this happy," Orion declared with characteristic confidence. But because choosing to be happy is easy when you have the best family in the world. As they climbed the stairs to their apartment, bigger now, thanks to combining it with the space next door, Eva caught Caspian's eye and saw her own contentment reflected there. They had built something beautiful from the wreckage of their first attempt at love, something real and lasting and utterly, perfectly theirs. Outside, the tide was coming in, and Eva no longer wondered whether some things were meant to return to shore. She knew they were. What did this story teach you about second chances and the courage to love again? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.